Thank you. My name is Richard diZerega. I'm a principal software development engineer at Microsoft. I really concentrate on all things Azure, Office 365, and AI. So I'm going to talk to you about what's new in AI. The first thing we're going to talk about is cognitive services. You saw Neil talk a little bit about this. Cognitive services, we really feel like what we're trying to do with this is really democratize AI. And what I mean by that is we want any developer to be able to add intelligence to their applications. You don't need to be a data scientist or have to deal with these really complex things in order to integrate some of these into your applications. And I'm going to just take a little tangent. Cognitive services has actually a pretty interesting history with the Build Tour. My colleague Matt Veloso 2 years ago, when the cognitive services were launched, he was doing the Build Tour, went to a hotel, and they didn't have a room ready for him. And in like 3 hours, he built just some idea he had with cognitive services. He built something called Twins or Not. Within 2 days, it was viral around the world. It had like millions of users. It was actually a really cool story about the scale of a viral application. And I think that speaks to not only the ease of developing with the cognitive services, but also the fact that adding that intelligence is really what makes an interesting and sticky application. So we really bucketize our cognitive services into a few different areas. So we have vision, we have speech cognitive services, language, knowledge, and search. And across all of these, what we really feel like is unique is they are very easy to use. If you know how to do HTTP operations, you can work with these APIs. It's just simple REST endpoints that you post some data to, get some data back. We also think it's very flexible from that standpoint. Because it's more of a simple API call, it's something that you can integrate into any of your applications. And then finally, it is very well tested. A lot of these cognitive services have graduated out of things like Microsoft Research or Bing or something that the machine learning team has cooked up. So if we look at the landscape of cognitive services across those different buckets, it's growing at this incredible rate. It seems like every few months we're introducing something new, and that is certainly the case with kind of this time of year with Build. We introduced a number of new things. Now, what you're seeing here, I like to call these the one-size-fits-all cognitive services. This is something where you don't really customize it. You just send some data in, it goes through our algorithms, and you get some information back. But what we found is that developers really want to customize the experience a little bit, but not go to the realm of like full-on machine learning where it might get a lot more complex building a model. And so one of the things that we've introduced is this layer of custom services. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of jump in to a quick demonstration of some of those custom cognitive services. Oh, not that one. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to show you is actually something inside of PowerPoint. I haven't rehearsed this. I'm really curious to see how it works out. But we introduced something really cool at Build called the PowerPoint translation add-in for PowerPoint. And what this does, it does live transcriptions of my language I could keep it English or I could translate it to a different language. And it's all powered by custom speech. So if I had a unique accent, I speak Texan, hopefully you guys can kind of pick up on that. I can translate that and pick up on my accent so that it hears my voice correctly. And so you can train this with your voice. But in addition to that, it's using some of our more, again, those one-size-fits-all things like translation. So I'll go out here and just do a quick slideshow. I'm going to say Start Subtitles. You can see I can pick my language and what I want it translated to. I'm going to translate to Chinese. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and say Start Subtitles. It's going to add some slides to my deck so that actually you could actually join this and get translations in whatever language you want. Now, if you look at the bottom there, I can't read that for the life of me, but that is the translation going through both custom speech and the translation services to do live translations in here. I'm going to stop it listening so it doesn't just go crazy on here. But the cool thing is again, that experience, if you were to join this from a device, you could pick a different language. You could say, well, I want Spanish, and you could get that on your device. The other cool thing is this is bi-directional, so I could unmute the audience. You could actually send questions in to me from your native language to mine. So really cool stuff there with that translation service. The other thing that I want to do is show you a little bit around what we're doing with custom vision. And to do this, I actually built a little application. I was joking around with my wife, and I was like, hey, what would be something that resonates in Australia? And at Build, when we introduced this service, we had Cornelia from the AI team do something where she identified plants based on their leaves. And I was like, oh, well, we have all this poison ivy at our house, which is a poisonous plant. That would be really cool if we did it with other poisonous things. And my wife was like, everything in Australia can kill you. And so I decided I'd build a model with snakes. So what I'm going to do is go out to this thing called the Snake Bot. And this is a really simple little bot. It's going to proactive message me here. So if I just give this 1 second, it's going to say, hey, I am trained to do North American snakes, but just assume all snakes can kill you, just like everything in Australia. So I'm going to pick a few snakes here. I'm going to go out to my desktop, and we'll go with some like really similar snakes. One's venomous, one's not. So I'm going to go with what's called a coral snake here. This is a very poisonous snake in North America. And it's going to go through that custom vision service, and you can see it came up with it's venomous, and it got the exact snake at 100% probability. I'll do this again with something very similar. This is a milk snake. It's completely harmless, but looks very similar, as you can see. And again, it's going to come back. Hopefully come back. Well, let's try this one more time. Sending. I didn't get my proactive message here. So maybe you guys are all hitting there we go. A non-venomous snake, it's a milk snake at 95.7. The interesting thing is I did this, I was floored at how accurate it was. It's not always so accurate on the exact snake, but venomous versus non-venomous, it was really good at. Even so much that I thought I'd play around with something really crazy and give it a picture of a snake stuffed animal. Just a little green snake here. And what you'll see is it's non-venomous, it's a green snake, and it's at 57%. So it's a low probability, but still pretty amazing there. Now, the cool thing is this didn't take rocket science to put together. I simply went out to the Custom Vision portal, I created a North American snakes project, and all I have to do is upload pictures of snakes and tag them. Now, I did like 3,000 pictures of snakes, so you could see I could go all the way down. Let's do something that's kind of cool, like a Western Diamondback. That'll bring up all these snakes, and you can see for each one of these, I can go see that this is marked with Western Diamondback, and it's venomous. Once I get all of my model together, I simply click on Train, and the algorithms behind the scenes learn off of these images, and then I can start kind of doing some testing. So I can do quick tests here, I can upload an image, and we can see how accurate it is across all of the different tags. Then, from a developer standpoint, it's ready for me to hand off and start building a cool application with. So if I go to under my performance here, you could see I have my 5th iteration. The 61.8%, that doesn't sound all that great, but at venomous versus non-venomous, I would bet it's like at 90 to 95% accurate. But I can go out here to my prediction URLs, and there is my REST endpoint. I simply just post an image to it, and I get the data back. So the actual bot that you saw probably only took like 2 to 3 hours to put together. It was more just adding images and tagging them. So hopefully you guys will definitely go out and play with the Custom Vision service. I'm really excited about it. If y'all are interested, I wrote a blog post about like my experience. There's lots of lessons learned around like the best type of images to use. So I have both the bot if you want to play around with it, and then also a blog post where you can go and read my findings. All right, I'm going to transition to bots. We saw a bot there, and bots are a very rich thing to use with AI. In fact, Microsoft Research, where a lot of our AI things are coming from, is also where our bot innovation stuff is coming from. So if we take an X-ray at a typical bot, what you'll see is your code sits here. Your code is just a RESTful endpoint. That's all you really need is some sort of web API that you can connect into our bot framework. Now, what our bot framework has is ultimately a layer of abstraction so that you build this one endpoint that I can then light up for all of these different channels. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see all the different channels. And this is just a handful. We introduced all kinds of new channels at Build, like Skype for Business and Bing, and all kinds of things that you can leverage, Cortana Skills. And so the great thing here is I build that one bot and it works everywhere. But we find that it's very common when you're building one of these bots that you're going to integrate various cognitive services. Lewis, natural language is a very popular one, is as I type into my bot, how can I try to figure out what the intent of the user was and maybe what sort of interesting information was in that message that they typed. And so it's a very interesting thing when you look at it in the landscape of AI. So rather than talk about a bunch of like specific tech things, what we thought we'd do from a bot standpoint is we've done a lot of work with partners building bots, a lot of work. And what we've found is there's some pretty good, solid, repeatable patterns that has come out of all this work with partners that we wanted to talk about. So actually, if you go out to aka.ms/botdesign, we detail this in a lot more detail than I'll go through, but I'll give you kind of the high-level look at some of the different bot scenarios we find. The first one is knowledge-based bots. The idea here being I have this huge corpus of data. We want someone to send in some sort of query, and we try to match up that data with what they were trying to do. Now, this fits into all kinds of things. It could be an event bot. Imagine if this had multiple tracks where you could just say, I want the next session on Windows UWP, right? We could search all of those sessions and try to find the correct match. Help desk type scenarios where I want to go and look at maybe previous tickets that were related to this issue. So this can be achieved a number of different ways. One is the Bing Knowledge Graph. The Bing Knowledge Graph is really neat in that I can go in and call and search all of that vast data inside of Bing, but I can also stem off of it. So an example of stemming would be I ask, who is Bill Gates? And then I might follow up to say, well, who is his wife? Well, just that who is his wife really means nothing if you don't take into context the previous question. And the Bing Knowledge Graph does an incredible job of that. Other tools that we've found for building knowledge-based bots are things like the QA Maker. Azure Search has been a really powerful tool for building these great knowledge-based type of bots. The next scenario is handoff to human. I don't know about you guys, but we probably all called into a phone line where it says, press 1 for this all the way to like 9, and your answer is operator. Give me someone that's human. Well, the idea is that if we can capture some information, try to triage a little bit of information, we could probably solve the user's issue a little bit faster. So the idea behind this is we first triage some data, and then based upon their answer here, I might say my computer isn't working. We could just maybe say, okay, well, we could really easily kind of branch this one way or the other based upon if it powers on or not. And so maybe we have an easy response and we give them that simple, repetitive solution. But in some cases, we might have to escalate. And we think there's 2 ways of doing that complex escalation. The first one is a 100% handoff to a human. So we can reroute all of that traffic instead of going to the bot to someone else that's on some sort of, maybe it's one of the channels like Skype for Business or Skype or Slack. We could easily reroute all the messages to that individual. But we've found kind of an interesting medium, which is what we call a supervised handoff to human. We'll read what they typed in, but try to come up with a couple of options that we present to someone behind the scenes, like the person that's trying to solve the issue, where instead of them having to like type out and but spend a lot of time trying to respond to one issue, they can just kind of triage the right answer and respond that way. So you can see this is kind of a really neat scenario, especially for organizations that want to provide a really good user experience for things like customer service. The next pattern is bot to web, and we have a number of really great patterns of this as well. The idea being is I'm in a bot, I might need to leave the bot to do something. Maybe it's because like the bot canvas doesn't support what I need to do, and we could easily go off to the web or maybe even a separate application to do something and then kind of pick back up the conversation later. One of the most common ways we've seen this used is if I need to authenticate to some sort of third-party data source. Imagine I have a bot that I want to connect to LinkedIn like you saw with the Tact bot. We might need the user at one point to go through like an OAuth flow so that our bot can have tokens and be able to use that. And so we would typically push them out to a browser, let them do that whole sign-in consent thing, and then we could behind the scenes pass that token back and continue the conversation. The last, I guess, pattern that I'm going to talk about is proactive messages. You guys have actually already seen 2 proactive messages and may not even know it. In the Tact demo that we did in the keynote, that started with a proactive message. I think most people are familiar with a bot reacting to a user that's typed some sort of message or said some sort of message. But the idea behind a proactive message is maybe we send a message based on some sort of trigger, like a transaction that occurred. Or maybe we even do it on some sort of timer. And so we think proactive messages are really unique and can do some really cool things. The other place we saw it is when I launched the Snake bot. I didn't have to type anything. It automatically sent me a proactive message. It said, hey, here's what I do. Start using me. It's actually really easy to do proactive messages. So this is just a really small little block of Node script. The important thing that you need in order to do a proactive message is you need to have, in a sense, it's the address of the user, which might be a combination of some sort of user ID and a channel ID. But with that address, you can easily go and send these messages without the user having to initiate anything. So one of the cool things is, since we talked a little bit about bots, I want you guys to really think about bots abstractly as a way of really brokering interaction between users and some sort of application. And I think this is a really good example of it.
Hey Zembo, look!
I think I'm seeing a drawing. What is it?
It's a picture of Isaac Newton.
According to Wikipedia.org, Isaac Newton was an English mathematician, astronomer, and physicist who is widely recognized as one of the most influential scientists of all time and a key figure in the scientific revolution.
When was he born?
Isaac Newton was born on December 25th, 1642.
Wow!
You look surprised. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did, Zembo.
Can you draw another picture?
Yes, I'll draw another picture of Neil Armstrong.
Cool. So Zenbo is a off-the-shelf robot made by ASUS, and behind the scenes, this is powered by almost everything that we've talked about. There's so much going on here, from things like computer vision, where I can hold up a picture and it detected the fact that was a picture. Custom speech, the fact that it is recognizing automatically who's speaking to it, maybe based on their voice and based upon maybe some facial recognition things that we have stored behind the scenes. The Bing Knowledge Graph was a big part of that when it was going and searching and finding information about Isaac Newton. Now, all of those different services came together to deliver Zenbo. So this is just a really high schematic of what was going on there. It's behind the scenes a bot. The whole thing is a bot. And it's again, using all of those cognitive services. It's using the Bing Knowledge Graph. It's even using other things within Azure, such as storage, if it needs to go and store like temporary like images and things like that, so it could display it back to the user that's interacting with that bot. So I think this is like don't necessarily think in the paradigm of all these channels. There's really unique ways that you can surface bots to deliver great experiences for users. So the next thing I'm going to transition to is cards. And cards is kind of an aspect of a bot. A number of channels support not just like simple text messages, but they support kind of their own user interface. And that's a card. Cards have been around a while. I think probably the first most prevalent place we saw things are in things like social media. So if I were to go into something like Twitter or Facebook and paste in like a web page or paste in like maybe a YouTube video, you see a card. Now, you usually have the option of not including the card, but it renders a card based upon some information that's there. Now, the cards are very static. They're very specific in how they're viewed. There's not a lot of, I would say, flexibility for you to make it display in different ways. And that's because it's using things like templates. So for Twitter, a card in Twitter, you, in your web page that you might want to paste in, you actually specify some metadata inside the page. So things like the type of card, the site link, the title and description, and even an image. And all of that helps deliver and render that card inside of Twitter. And it's going to be consistent, very consistent, so that if I'm pasting sites from multiple different sites, it's always going to render and look the same. Facebook also does a lot of this, but even inside of Messenger, Facebook has this concept of templates that you can use inside of Facebook Messenger. So this is an example of a template for a flight. You can see my flight itinerary here. I don't get to specify, maybe it's a little tiny prop plane. I don't get to change the plane icons or anything that are a part of this card. I really just get to put in the core data inside of this card, and it's going to render consistently. And Facebook and Twitter want that type of experience. But that kind of introduces a challenge. Like, developers want more surface area, more user experience that they can have inside of all of these different channels. So we have kind of this weird issue where these channels, they want to be really kind of fixed in their templates. But on the other end, a developer might want this like really open canvas where they can just send HTML and have that render. And there's some big issues there. Like, you have a lot of inconsistency. Like, one thing might look completely different from another. You don't see a lot of consistency, which is actually a bad user experience. People have trouble finding different things when if I paste a video one way, in order to view it, it's on the left, and another one, it might be on the right. That starts to get hard for a user to be able to use it. So we've done a lot of work. Is there a better way to do this where we can provide more flexibility for developers and have a better user experience inside of a bot, but still give these channels the kind of the control they want to have a good user experience across different integrations? And what we came up with is what's called adaptive cards. This is a flexible, adopted payload that allows me to, in a sense, deliver a high majority of scenarios. So we say about 80% of needs can be met with these adaptive cards. And the idea is that I send one block of JSON that automatically, through the bot framework, we convert that the way it needs to render in all of the different channels. So just to kind of give you an idea of this, like, here is the exact same message across a number of different channels. So maybe a toast notification in Windows, within Microsoft Teams, in Skype, on Android, and iOS. The cool thing is this isn't just a Microsoft thing. We worked incredibly hard to make this more of a standard across a lot of different chat-based workspaces. And you'll see that when I jump to the demo here. So let's jump out to the adaptive cards demo. All right, so if you go to adaptivecards.io, that's the site for it. I'll zoom in on it here. You can see adaptivecards.io. This is a really great, I guess I would call it a microsite for learning all the things that you can do with these adaptive cards. And it has some really powerful tools within it. So I'm going to go first into the visualizer. The visualizer allows me to basically put together that block of JSON and see how it's going to render across all my different channels. So right now, this is how this card would look inside of Microsoft Teams. The cool thing, this is live. If I wanted to change this and say, I'll change maybe the text here to Hello Sydney. you can see that it's live updating over on the card. But what's cool is I can go and see, is this going to meet my needs? I'm going to go and select maybe some of these other things, like what is it going to look like on Skype? What is it going to look like on Slack, right? So I can go and see that across all of these different things. What is it going to look like on Facebook? So that's, again, speaking to the fact that we're really trying to work with these other channels, even organizations that would be competitors to Microsoft, to have a really good, consistent experience. The other thing that's really neat in here is we have a samples area. You certainly have a schema that's published to where you can go see all the different things that you can do inside of this. The other thing I'll just quickly point out, I should have pointed this out earlier, is that you notice we have a speak thing in here. I've done a lot with more like text-based bots. We saw how Zenbo was more audio-based, and so these adaptive cards have this speak alternative. I can go and put that in there, and if it goes to a channel that supports audio, we can have, again, not only a consistent like GUI, but we can also have a consistent audio experience for these. But let me go to the samples here. And we have samples for all kinds of different things. So you saw on Facebook there was an itinerary. I can go and grab this itinerary one here, or if I wanted like an image gallery, or restaurant information, stock updates, weather. We have all of these. So I'll take this weather, let's do the weather large. I'll try it myself. That'll bring it into that visualizer where I can tweak it a little bit more. And so really, really neat what we're doing here with this. Again, I can tweak it, but I have all of these different channels that I can see what this is going to look like in. So if I wanted to see what it's going to look like in Skype, here's one that you probably wouldn't expect. Let's see what this looks like on SMS. That's pretty interesting. How is it doing that in SMS? Well, we can actually take that card JSON, we can actually generate an image that we can send to a mobile device. So when we talk about these cards, even some of these channels that haven't traditionally been able to support GUIs, we can do that through the bot framework and these adaptive cards. All right. So I want to leave you guys with a few links that you can go and learn more about this. Certainly the custom vision service. I hope that what you saw was interesting with custom vision. I am actually quite blown away with how accurate it is, even with images with bad backgrounds. You typically want solid backgrounds, so I highly recommend you check that out. We saw kind of the end result of custom speech, but again, that's a really interesting thing if you're building voice-based things and you want to try to adapt to your users that might have different dialects and things like that. In addition to that, go try out our cognitive services. Really encourage you to go do that. Most of the cognitive services have an ability for you to do a certain number of calls free if you have an Azure subscription, and then there's a higher tier if you want to do a higher volume of things. So definitely go check out Microsoft.com/AI to get all of the great information that is there.